Well, welcome back, everybody. And I'm super excited about today's episode here on the media platform. If you've ever felt like you're running on a financial hamster wheel, today's episode is going to change your perspective on money forever. We're going to dive into what we call the currency creation protocol, where we're going to be discussing signature credit, how to reclaim historical credit energy from your past mortgages, loans, credit cards, even daily expenditure. So get ready because you're about to learn how to play the monopoly board of commerce at pro level instead of being stuck in survival mode. Ian, I'm super excited to dig into this one.
Well, in my humble opinion, everybody who's over the age of majority should know this. Whether they do anything with it is up to them. But my word, if I'd known this when I was 18, what a different journey I would have had navigating on the monopoly board. It really is a game changer. I think a lot of people are confused about what it is and how it works. But because of the way my brain's wired up, I have to know why it works. It's not good enough for me to know what it is and how it's supposed to work. I need to know why it works.
Yeah.
And, that's to me what everybody should be doing. They should be saying, what is this? How does it work? And more importantly, why does it work? And that's hopefully what we're going to cover on today's session. So I hope.
Absolutely. Well, let's dig in, shall we? In terms of, you've put out a new technical report on currency creation. I read through that with great excitement yesterday and had a good dig into that. Really, question-wise, I think if we start with just the signature credit part itself, just for people understanding or redefining what money actually is and who creates that. You claim in your report that commercial banks create credit out of nothing, ex nihilo, as it's called. How does that align? Because what I want people to understand here is that it's not just what you're saying. How does that align with the research, for example, of Professor Richard Werner and the Bank of England as well?
Well, it's interesting to me that someone like Richard Werner, who studied this subject for 16 years and wrote a number of papers on the subject, in the early 2000s wrote a book called The Princes of the Yen, which was all about how the Central Bank of Japan was financing its rapid growth, because it had a rapid growth. Japan as an economy rapidly grew. China has rapidly grown. If you look at the hegemon of the USA, they've been dominant for over 100 years. And what Richard Werner was looking at was, basically how do economies get financed? I studied the Weimar Republic some time ago, which is the German Republic. Between the First World War and the Second World War, Germany's economy was absolutely devastated. In 1919, war, reparations, an economy broken, mass unemployment, and within 15 years from the end of the First War to the beginning of the Second War, Germany's economy is transformed. With autobahns, with one of the biggest armies in the world, with navy, with up-to-date ships, with an air force, with all the latest aircraft at the time. And for the way I look at things, I have to know, well, how did they do that? How did that all come about? Where is there really a magic money tree that you just go to finance all of that? How does Japan go from where it was and its rapid growth? How does China become, probably arguably the second most powerful nation on the planet economically after America? And it may even be number one within the next few years. How does this work? Again, the question I ask all the time is, if the world debt is, in hundreds of trillions of dollars, who's it owed to? How do they finance wars? You know, there's this Iran war going on right at the moment. How does the US finance the Iran war? They've got $1 trillion annual budget for their military. How does that get financed? You know, you've got, if you look in recent history, you've got the so-called pandemic. You know, 2019, 2020, suddenly all the governments around the world are issuing bailouts and furloughs and loans and all kinds of things.
Bounce back loans and everything in between,
Where does that come from? You know, and then if you just look at, and then you look at the macro picture, which intrigues me. You've got countries around the world, and notably in Africa, where you've got people living in mud huts, and you've got people in shanty towns. And I've been there. I've been to Brazil. I've played football in Brazil. There's shanty towns. I've played football in Argentina. There are shanty towns. You've got a 5-star hotel, and literally within a half a mile down the road, you've got a shanty town in Argentina. So, you know, how do these poor economies, how do they stay poor? Why don't they rise up, you know, alongside China and Japan and USA and what have you? And it's an intriguing question for my brain to look into that and say, well, I need to understand that. I need to understand why one country is rich and another one is poor. What's the reason for that? And when you start looking into ex nihilo credit creation, it gives you the answer. What they've done is they've created a system which is basically a ledgering system. It's just a big ledger with all these different countries operating at different levels, with different access to the ability to create currency ex nihilo, which is out of nothing, which is basically the mortgage over the people's energy. That's really what's going on. There shouldn't be, in my opinion, there shouldn't be any poverty in the world.
No.
Zero. Everybody should be able to get whatever it is that they want and need, within reason, certainly what people need. There shouldn't be social security. There shouldn't be, you know, save up for your pension. All of these things are, you know, they're structures that most are programmed to follow. But when you understand how the game of Monopoly works, to me, it significantly calls into question why there are taxes, why one country's poor and another one's rich, why one family's poor and another one's rich. You know, when you really sort of step back from how the world seems to work, there's a lot of unfairness here. And there's a lot of distress, and there's a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot of fear. And there are people who spend most of their time thinking about how they're going to survive financially. And it shouldn't be like that. When you know how the game of Monopoly is being played and what the rules are and how the ex nihilo credit creation works at the you know, person level and at the government level, it calls into question why is there a budget? Why does every country have a chancellor? Why do you need to raise taxes to finance things when the currency is created ex nihilo out of nothing? You know, why are they not debating this in the governments? Why isn't people saying to the chancellors of the exchequer all around the world, what are you doing, man? You know, like you keep telling us you need to balance the budget, but we know that you create currency ex nihilo. So what budget are you actually balancing? When politicians say vote for me and I'll reduce the debt, like Donald Trump did, you know, when he was first elected, when you know that it's impossible to reduce the debt, because the whole system is based on debt. And yet people hoover up this information and suck it in and never question it. Never say, well, that sounds a bit strange. How are they actually going to do that? No government in history has ever reduced the debt, certainly in the last 120 odd years. So how's this government going to do it? What are they going to do that's different? But people don't ask the question because it seems to be almost like a taboo subject. It's like a black box that people don't want to go into. They know what they know. They don't really want to understand it because it might be a bit scary, I think. They might think it's beyond their comprehension. So it's too complicated, so I won't even get involved in thinking about it. I just accept it for the way it is. And I think that a lot of people are in that mindset. They really don't want to know how it works because it might not work the way they believe it to work. And then that may cause fear and anxiety. And I think a lot of people just don't want to know. They're comfortable in their ignorance. They're quite comfortable there because they don't have to be challenged. And I think this is what's going on. Whereas I look at the world very differently. I look at it and say, if there are problems in the world, why aren't we trying to solve them? What can we do to solve them? And if you can't solve them for everyone, who can you solve them for? And that's where our Republic of Old Souls nation comes from. So for those people who want to solve their problems, we've got a pathway.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the only pathways available, in my humble opinion. I don't think there is any other pathway available out there that's been figured out from A through Z. But it's not for everyone because the way that the game of Monopoly works, not everybody could do it. But it shouldn't be like that. But you have to play within the rules. And the rules, there is a constraint on how many people can play the way that we teach, the way that we show. That's because of its constraint of the amount of taxes that are being paid. We'll perhaps get into that. But the whole subject to me. But there again, a lot of people will go to the pharmacy and having got a prescription from the doctor that says take 3 of these a day and you might get well. And they've no idea what's in these 3 things, these 3 tablets they're going to take. They have absolutely no idea at all. They could be full of arsenic. Who knows what's in them? Yet because the doctor said you've got to take them and the pharmacist doles them out, people are doing it all around the world every day of the week. And yet very few people actually know what they're taking. So it's an example of where people just don't want to know. They rely on the experts. The doctor is the expert. We're not going to question the doctor. We'll just do what the doctor recommends and never question it, never investigate it. And I think that's what happens with the so-called money. We'll leave that to the experts. We'll leave it to the economists. We'll leave it to the chancellors of the exchequer. We'll leave it to the bankers. We'll leave it to the money men. And we won't ask any questions because we'll just leave it to the experts. And that's what I think is going on in many, many areas. I say that you don't need to be that. You don't need to go to university for 10 years to understand what we're going to talk about today. It's really quite simple.
Absolutely not. No. I've got no formal education. I left school at the age of 11. I was a bit of a reprobate, to be fair. But I was, quote unquote, homeschooled, shall we say, from 11 through to 16 back in the 80s when there wasn't any real support for that. There wasn't any real infrastructure for that. My mum did the best she could. My dad, he was working at the university. He was a university lecturer at the time in the 80s. I did okay with maths, I guess, because my dad he had a PhD in mathematics, so he was quite clever with numbers. But I have no O levels, no A levels, no qualifications whatsoever. I'm not particularly technically savvy, shall we say. Anybody that knows me knows that I rely very heavily on Kirsty, my wife, for anything to do with technology, whether it's mobile phones or laptops or anything of that nature. She's way better at that than I am. But I get this. The only reason I get this is because I've taken time to read your documents, and it interests me as well. You know, why would it not interest me? This impacts my future, my kids' future, their children. I'm a granddad now, so my grandchildren's future. It impacts a lot for me. So I prioritize and I take the time to understand. And if there's something I don't understand, I ask, and I ask questions until I get clarity on that. So I absolutely agree. And I don't think this is beyond anybody. You just need to have an interest and prioritize what you choose to take in. You know, is it Netflix or is it learning how to secure your future? That's the way I look at it. And like you said, like any board games have a maximum number of players on them, don't they? You know,
They
this
do.
board game is for 4 to 6 players or whatever it is. There is a maximum number of people that can play this game of Monopoly. And if you come into the game too late, you might not be able to play. And that would be a crying shame. So, I mean, talking about signature credit, what exactly is signature credit? How does the act of sort of, you know, signing a mortgage or a loan or an application actually create value?
Well, in the modern slavery game of Monopoly, which is what it is, those that run the Monopoly board, they took a mortgage out over the people and over all the assets. So, you know, when you get your head around how this game works, the Monopoly board is artificial. You can't step on it. You can't feel it, touch it. It's just an artificial construct. And what they've done is they've put all of these artificial pieces onto this artificial Monopoly board. It's a bit like a hologram. You're looking at a hologram. It's not real. You can put your hand straight through it, but it's all artificial. But in order to enslave the planet, but whilst appearing to give people who are playing the game of Monopoly the appearance, the perception of wealth. So I'll explain what I mean by that. You start off playing the game. You don't even know you're playing the game when you start. Nobody says, here's the rules. Nobody says, here's the box with all the pieces in it, and go and unpack it and have a look at the instructions, and then start, you know, and then getting a few other people around you to play it with. No, you're just catapulted straight into it, and everybody around you is playing it, but nobody knows what they're actually playing. Hardly anybody. I've never met anybody who's actually ever figured it out. So everybody's playing the game, believing that the way to win the game is to work hard, or be very smart, or partner up with somebody who's got some resources and, you know, team up with them, or invent something that might change the world and you earn very well from that, or just like be very good at whatever it is you're doing, and then you get more money because you're competing on the Monopoly board with whoever else is in your genre who's doing similar things to you, and then of course you've got to be better than them because it's very competitive, this Monopoly board. And if you're not better than the majority of people playing the game that you're playing, you're going to go hungry. So that's the modern slavery part, you see. So, and then the illusion of wealth, which is absolutely genius, is that the entire Monopoly board has been mortgaged, and the collateral that finances the board is all of the assets. Have got a mortgage on them, and that's what we call the legal charge. So those that run the Monopoly board, the governments, which are all interconnected, by the way, they have a legal charge over all the assets, property, land, buildings, any infrastructure, that it's all owned by the governments, because they use that land and those assets as collateral for the mortgage. So like when you go and you say, I want to get a mortgage on a house, what does the bank do? It takes a charge over the house. That's the collateral. That's the security for the loan, right? But if you then look at it from a much bigger viewpoint, travel up. Just imagine you were looking down at the planet, whatever the shape of the planet is. Everything in that view that you're looking at has been mortgaged. So the holder of the mortgage, which is the cabal, they then what they then do is they go one step further than just all the assets. Is they take a mortgage out over the energy of the people. So the people's energy has also been mortgaged. So you've got all the assets and all the energy that's been mortgaged. And the only way that the players can access the game is through this artificial construct, which is the person, the citizen, the player piece that goes, that maneuvers around the monopoly board. And the only way you can progress on the monopoly board, unless you know what we're going to talk about today, is by competing on the monopoly board. Your player piece has got to be, faster, smarter, sell more things, do more things on the board if you're going to succeed. So, some players that have done really well on the monopoly board, they will strut round with their, inflated egos, because that's what happens when people do really well on the monopoly board. I've seen it many times, is that they actually believe that all these things that they've acquired, like their big mansion and their 10 cars and their yacht and their private jet and all of these things that they've got, and their companies and their shares and their cryptocurrencies and all of these things that they think that they own, they don't realize that all of those things are actually owned by those that run the monopoly board, because those that run the monopoly board have got a legal title over all of those things. And what they've given back to the player piece, not even to the player piece, is a quotable title, which is the use of the thing. So it's no different from if you went and rented a car and said, can I rent this car for a week because I'm on holiday, I want to have a car. And they say, here's the car, here's the keys, and by the way, you've got to pay whatever you're paying for the week's car hire, and that is taxes. So you rent the thing and you pay tax. You rent the house even though you think you own it, and you pay tax. Everything, you drive down the road in your car doesn't belong to you, and you're paying road tax. So you see the whole monopoly board, when you figure out how it works, is very different from how it is perceived to work. Those that believe that they're very rich have got zero, and those that believe that they're very poor and can never change it, they can. Everyone's got a level playing field, but most people don't know it because they don't understand how the game works. When you figure out how the game works, then you have to question why more people don't want to know. And I find that intriguing. I mean, if I just use an example, right? Let's suppose that you were in a casino and you walk into a casino and there's a bloke coming out of the casino with a suitcase full of dollars, and you bump into this guy and he says, hold on a minute, I've just had a really good day in the casino. I don't want to lose my briefcase, so don't bump into me again. And you say, well, how did you win all those dollars in this casino today? And he said, I know the rules. I know how to play the casino at their own game. And every time I come in this casino, I walk out with a suitcase full of dollars. Would you not think you'd want to go and have a coffee with that guy? Sit down and say, well, can you not explain to me how do you beat the casino every time you come into it? would you not want to sit down and ask a few questions, or would you just say, "Well, good luck to you, mate. Hope it keeps on going," and then just walk in and end up losing most of your chips, because that's what tends to happen when you go in the casino. Every now and again you might win, but overall you lose. Well, in this game of Monopoly, the way that they've got everyone to play, nobody can win unless you know what we're talking about today. You literally cannot win the game, because it doesn't matter how many houses you've got, cars, boats, jets, businesses, investments, shares, anything. It doesn't matter how many of those you've got. You've actually got zero. So how can you win a game when there is no actual, there's nothing other than zero on the board? Because everything on the board has already been mortgaged, and the actual ownership of everything on the board is not for you. It's for those who run the board. So you just get to play, and you have to rent. Everything you do on the Monopoly board, you are actually renting things on the board, which is why there are taxes. So that, that's to me, that what I've just explained there has taken me many, many years to figure out. But it's exactly how it works. And I would debate anybody. I don't care who they are. You can bring me the best economists in the world and I'll debate them. And I don't think they would be able to win the debate, because they don't even know themselves how it works. I would speculate.
No. And I think part of the genius of the game is that people are, and the way the system has been created is to distract, to engage people in other things that aren't so important. Schooling, the 9 to 5, retirement, whatever it may be, there's always a distraction that takes up time away from what is staring them in the face. So even for people who may be able to get a real good comprehension of this, they're too busy, aren't they? They're too distracted. They're too busy with other things to even pay attention in the first place. So I get that.
We've all been there, and many of us are still there. I mean, I spent most of my early career working 7 days a week, building up my business. I thought that was the pathway that was going to give me satisfaction, because I loved what I was doing, and it brought riches. So I thought. When I look back on it, I'm thinking, what a fool. I spent all that time building something which is actually completely lacks substance. There's no substance to it at all. I spent 7 days a week working on it for many, many years. So it's like, well, why would you do that? Well, the only reason you would do it is because you were living in a delusion. I was living in a delusion, thinking that that's the only way to get on in life. And to do something you enjoy. Now, apart from doing something you enjoy, all the rest of it was complete and utter nonsense, because there's no substance to anything. I could have had 100 companies around the world with, I could have bought an island and lived on an island like some people have done. And I still would have owned zero. Which to me is, if many people are playing the game because they want things. I wasn't playing it because I wanted stuff. I was playing it because I wanted to help people and I wanted to solve problems, because I get more satisfaction out of that than looking in my bank account and seeing how many zeros have I got in my bank account. I couldn't give a toss, quite frankly. I'm more interested in solving the problems. That's what juices me up, not the zeros in the bank account. I couldn't care less. As long as there's something in there and you can carry on, that's all I care about. So everyone's different. So to me, the rules of the game aren't explained. Just to summarize this, the rules are not explained. I don't believe that very many people know what the rules are. Probably the only people that know what the rules are those that are controlling the Monopoly board. Most people in the world are distracted by whatever it is they're doing, whether they're going towards something because they want to get something bigger and better, or they're trying to run away from something, which is the fear of not having enough. So they're either going towards something because they're greedy, or they're running away because they're fearful, or one or the other. That's, to me, I mean, I know that's a big generalization, but that's how I see it. When you ask people, it's quite interesting when you meet people for the first time and you say, "Oh, hi, how are you? Can you tell me all about you?" And what they'll do is they'll tell you about their career. Yeah, they won't say, "You know what? I'm a genius at playing the piano," or I'm a genius at singing. No, they'll tell you about their job or their business. They won't ever tell you about their own talent. They won't say, "You know what? I'm pretty good at solving problems," or "You know what? I'm pretty good at figuring out how to do a jigsaw puzzle," or anything like that. No, they'll tell you about their job. They'll tell you about their business, and then they'll go on and on about it because it's the only thing that they generally think about is how they're going to make ends meet or how they're going to get more and more through their business. So you see, they've been programmed to play the game of Monopoly, to try and either get away from their debt and their taxes or go towards riches where neither of them are real.
Yeah.
It's quite an interesting paradox for me.
It is. It is. Well, let's dig into the actual substance behind this then, Ian. The Clifford Protocol. You mentioned there are 5 steps, like almost a scientific sequence for this recoupment that we're talking about. So why is this protocol considered a scientific breakthrough? When you think of sort of fiduciary law, what's the breakdown of, or the substance behind why it's such a breakthrough for people?
Well, what I've done is I've reversed engineered how it works. How does the money arrive in your bank account? How does the money arrive if you took a mortgage, credit card, loan? How does the government get, how do they finance all these different things that they are doing? I've always been intrigued by that. But the catalyst for me was when I had my joint venture with the Bank of Scotland that became Halifax Bank of Scotland, then Lloyds Bank. And then they closed me down and blamed me, and I'm not going to go into that story, but it was all because the bank had allegedly lent my customers a whole load of money.
Yeah.
And then they called it in, they called the loans in. So that was the beginning of me trying to really understand, how does it work? How did the bank have the right to ruin people's lives, to cause people to commit suicide?
Literally.
Some of them,
yeah.
Literally. This isn't a story, this is real. How did the bank have that power to cause people to commit suicide? All because there was allegedly a loan that didn't get paid back, or the bank came in and seized all the assets to pay it back. And I was intrigued by it because it didn't make any sense to me. Even though I was a money manager, I'd never asked that question. So the first thing that you've got to do, in my opinion, if you want to understand this, comprehend it, is you've got to understand how it's wired up. If you want to, I remember my dad said to me when I was a kid, he said, "If you want to understand how anything works, take it apart. Take it apart, and then rebuild it. So if you want to understand how an engine works, take it apart and then rebuild it, and then you might understand what's going on with the engine." So that's what I've done with the finances. I took it apart so that I could try and rebuild it. And when you take something apart, you do understand how it works, generally speaking, if you understand what the components are. So if you look at the components of what's going on with money, the biggest component of money is energy. That's it. It's human energy. And if you're going to enslave the population of the world, how are you going to do that without them realizing? Are you going to put them in a cage, or are you going to chain them up? Because they probably notice that. Or are you going to enslave them through them handing over their energy onto a monopoly board that they don't even know is a monopoly board, and then others get to use it, and then you lend it back to them, and then get them to go round and round the monopoly board to earn sufficient tokens that they can use to pay the interest and the taxes on their own energy. I mean, it's obscene. Mm-hmm. It's one of the most egregious systems I've ever looked at.
So and can you break down?
Yeah, billions are playing it every day without realizing it.
Yeah. Could you walk us through the 5-step sequence then of the actual Clifford protocol, from sort of just recognition and understanding what's going on to then the redirection side of things as well? So I think a lot of people misunderstand what recoupment actually is. And, you know, we're obviously talking about currency creation today. And I know that that's been a popular subject with many of our members, but I still think people don't get it. I really don't. So if you could just walk us through the 5 steps, I think that's going to be really beneficial to the audience.
Well, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to know, when did you sign something? The signature creates the credit. And it's not a physical signature with a quill pen and some ink and a candle. No. It's not that kind of signature. A signature is an intention. It's a contract, really. So you may have physically signed a bit of paper if you got a mortgage years ago. You may have signed a bit of paper when you got a bank account. You may have signed a credit agreement for your credit card. It doesn't really matter whether you physically signed a bit of paper or not. In the Monopoly Board, in the rules of the Monopoly Board, in terms of banking, it's the intention. It's a contract because you intended to do something, pay something, enter into a debt contract of some nature, and it's the intention, and that's what's known as the signature. So the signature is like the binding of the contract, if you like. Okay. So you've got to track down where was your signature? Did you, when you made bank payments, presumably you knew you were making them. So you have to have had an intention to have made them, whether that was a debit card payment, whether it was a BACS payment or a direct transfer or whatever it was. You must have had the intention to have done it. Otherwise, you presumably wouldn't have done it unless someone stole your debit card. But in most cases, there's the intention to make a transaction. That transaction could have been getting a mortgage. It could have been getting a credit card loan. It could have been saying to the employer, yeah, I'll be part of your PAYE or your W-2 system, your tax system, where you give me the balance and take off the taxes from the wages. That's also a signature. It could be that you basically put your trust in the bank because you opened an account with them and you had to sign to open the account, to open the mortgage, to open the credit card, to open the loan. At some point along the way, you would have signed something or you would have intended to do something with a bank. And the banks are very, very critical on the Monopoly Board. You know, the Monopoly Board's got hotels. There's a lot of hotels on the Monopoly Board, on the actual Monopoly Board. There should be banks on there because the banks are all operating as the nominees for the player, not the player piece, for the player, really, because the player is the living man, woman that's playing through the piece on the Monopoly Board. And the banks are very pivotal on this Monopoly Board because they are fiduciaries, trustees, nominees for looking after the energy that's been transferred through the signature. So the first thing you need to do is you need to figure out, when did you use your signature? Which banks used your signature to create credit? Bank payments, mortgages, loans, credit cards, or even deductions from wages. All of those things are using your signature to create transactions on this artificial Monopoly Board. So, fine, you go back into your records or you go into your memory and you say, yeah, I had a bank account with this bank in this year, and I had a mortgage with that bank in that year, and a credit card and a loan, and my employer used to deduct the taxes from my wages, and I remember it came from this bank. That's the bank that used to send me my wage check or my wages. So you have to, first of all, step one is you have to remember which banks that you engage with, that you were using your signature to create credit. And then you can write them all down, put them in a ledger, estimate what you think your signature was worth, how many transactions, what were the rough values of them, and just write it down. It doesn't have to be to the penny. Nobody can remember how many, what the value of their bank payments were 25 years ago. And I wouldn't expect anybody to have the records. Even if they had meticulous records, they probably haven't got them going back that far. So you just have to estimate it, because it doesn't really matter.
Just for clarity as well, because for the audience, we spoke at the very beginning, or I spoke at the very beginning about daily expenditure as well. What you've just listed here specifically is things like, mortgages, loans, credit cards, those types of things, PAYE tax from your wages, and the signature being the intent. So if we just kind of wrap that all up, as far as we know what those are, they're the big kind of quote unquote purchases or debts that people will have: past mortgages, credit cards, loans, whatever it may be. But then when you think about daily expenditure compounded over 25, 30 years or whatever, that's a lot of signature credit energy as well. So are you saying that from a signature point of view, and I'm bringing this up to modern times now, because obviously this is different 25 years ago, but every time I go to the petrol station and I fill the car up, which costs an arm and a leg these days, as we all know, and I get my trusty little mobile phone out and I tap it on the counter, or every time I go to Sainsbury's or Tesco's or wherever you do your shopping and you buy your week's worth of shopping, which again is horrific these days, and you do the same thing, you tap it on the contactless. Is that an intent? Is that a signature? Is that signature credit that I'm creating?
Yeah, your intention to make that transaction, which is to pay in the future, because you can't pay now because there's no money to pay now. You can only pay in the future, which is what you're doing when you're issuing that, tapping that device, typing your PIN number in and making a transfer, or what you think is a transfer. That's the signature. And that's going to create new credit on this monopoly board to add to all of the other credit that's on the monopoly board. That's your world debt, which is going up. It's skyrocketing up at the rate of knots every moment of every day, 7 days a week. Just have a look at the world debt clock and you'll see. Those numbers, it's like they go round and round and round. It's like they're going up in a spiral. It's unbelievable. If you watch it, it's like hypnotic. How much they're just going up and up and up and up. And they've never once come down, and they never will. Because all of those signatures, and every time any government in the world is going to use their signature credit to create new currency, to finance something that's going on in their country, that's adding to the world debt clock. And there's no limit to it, really.
So when it comes to people trying to put a number on this and think about, well, what is my signature credit? Because according to what you've mentioned in the Clifford Protocol and these steps, that you can go back to the age of majority. You can go back to the age of 18 or 21 or 25 or whatever it is in the country that you're in, and you can reclaim the taxes. And we'll talk about the tax side of things in a minute, because I think this is where people have this misconception of what they're actually getting back. But in terms of people putting a number to this, if they've been working, just to keep it super simple, if I was working for the same company, loyal employee for 25, 30 years, let's say, and I knew, broadly speaking, what my salary was each and every year for the last 25 years, knew when I got a pay rise, I could kind of work out how much signature credit had been created there. But then when you think about what your monthly expenditure is, in the vast majority of cases, what comes in goes out. In most cases, I don't think there's going to be many families or people watching this today that, get their salary and at the end of the month, having paid their bills and done whatever they need to do, they've got some huge surplus there. So
That's right.
when it comes to them making that calculation, if they think about what they've earned for the last 25 years, they need to double that pretty much, don't they? Because they've got to think about most of that's gone out of my bank account as well.
It's what's gone out is your credit going out. You see, whenever funds leave your account, just call them funds because everyone probably knows what that means.
Yeah.
When funds leave the account, that is credit going out onto the board. When you sign for a mortgage, loan, or credit card, that's that credit, the face value of the debt instrument, whether it's a mortgage, loan, or credit card, add the face value to what you've paid out, what you have funded out, transferred out of your bank accounts.
Yep.
From the age of 18 or 21, depending on which country you're in, that's what we're talking about. That's the energy you've put on the board.
Yeah.
And you've done it through the nominees, the banks. The banks are operating as nominees for you, the real you, the living, breathing, sentient you. The banks are operating as your nominee, each one of them. And a nominee is just a fiduciary. So you've handed over your energy without realizing it to the banks that are holding on to it as if it were theirs. And I think we've been down this pathway before. When Cyprus was having major problems, when Venezuela was having major problems, when all sorts of countries around the world were collapsing, their economies were collapsing, people went to the bank and tried to get their money out of the bank to realize that it wasn't theirs.
Yeah.
Because it never was theirs. And A, there's no money. And B, you gave it to the bank as the nominee to look after it for you, but you basically signed it over to them without realizing it. And people go around saying, well, I keep my money in the bank because the bank's been around for centuries, so they're not going to go bust, are they? And they'll look after my money. Well, you haven't got any money in the bank.
No.
And the bank could go bust tomorrow morning and you would get nothing. So you see, all you're doing is transferring your energy into a structure. It's a trust, really. And you're putting the control of your energy in the hands of the trustee. The trustee is the bank, a nominee, a fiduciary for you. And then, but you don't ask, but you never ask the bank, hey, what's the terms of this deal? I'm going to give you my energy. You're going to look after it for me. You're going to use it and you're going to profit from it. And then what you're actually going to do, if I can understand this right, is you're going to send it back to me and charge interest on my energy. Is that what you're going to do? And that's exactly what they're doing all the time. But worse than that, because you see, the first step is knowing where your energy's gone, right? You've got to track down, where did you put your energy? Where did it leave you? And go on the monopoly board through which banks? Bank payments out of your account. Which banks facilitated those payments? Which mortgage companies did you engage with? Which credit card loan companies did you engage with? What employer bank account did you get your wages from? Add those things up from the age of 18 or 21 to now. That is how much energy you have put on the monopoly board, which is still on the board.
Yeah.
It's never left the board. It's still there. Add all those together, and that is your world debt. It's 97% of world debt. It's all of that energy is being put on the monopoly board. So the second step of the process is, once you've got the banks that you've entrusted with your energy, you've got the names of them, you've got the rough amounts per year that you put on the board. You put all that in a schedule, and that's how much you would be able to recoup as signature credit. So the next step is, and this isn't for the members to do, the next step is to figure out which banks, the linkages between the banks that the member has put down on their schedule and the next tier of banking, which is the investment banks.
Okay.
So you've got the clearing banks. Those are the banks you get your mortgage from, your credit card, your loan, you do your bank payments. And it's a little bit more complicated today because you've got these intermediary fintech platforms like Revolut and like Monzo and like all sorts of others.
Yeah.
I think Revolut might just become a bank, actually. Most of them are not banks. They work with clearing banks, right?
Yeah.
There is a network of clearing banks in the world. There are thousands of clearing banks in the world, and they have intermediaries that interface with the customers that call themselves banks, but they're not actually banks. They're just like intermediaries, really. But the actual clearing banks, what they do with your credit, which is your energy you've put into their system, is they sell it. And they sell it to the investment banks.
Okay.
Because the investment banks use it because they can hypothecate it and make more from it. It's a multiplier. They can multiply it up and they can trade it. And they do extremely well from it. As evidenced by, if you look at the taxes that JP Morgan paid just recently, I think it was $60 billion in tax.
Wow.
60 billion.
Just in
one
taxes.
in one bank. So how did they do that? How did JP Morgan make that much profit that it had to pay 60 billion in taxes? They must have made a lot more than 60 billion, yeah?
Of course.
Because they wouldn't be paying tax unless they had. So what the next step is to track the credit that you've put on the board in with the clearing banks. The clearing banks have all got a relationship with investment banks, and you won't know this, but your energy would have been packaged and put into a security, which is like a bond. It's like an investment wrapper, and that would be given a number, a CUSIP number or some other identification number, and then it would be traded. So your energy is packaged up along with thousands of other people's energy, packaged up into these bonds, all with identification numbers, all different, literally millions of bonds being traded by the investment banks. Okay. You would be intrigued if you were to go on to Euroclear or go on to Bloomberg Terminal, right? This is what the investment banks use to track all of these bonds. You've got lists and lists and lists, as long as your arm, of these bonds that they're all trading, right? Hundreds of thousands of them, if not millions of these bonds. And what is in those bonds is human energy, basically, because that's the only thing that is really backing the money. The physical assets that have been mortgaged and the energy of the people. That is what is running the monopoly board. So step 2 is, and it's not for the member, and the members would probably never be able to figure it out. How do you track the linkage between the clearing bank and the investment, the bonds, and then the bonds to the investment bank? Because that's your pathway. Clearing bank, bond to investment bank, and then investment bank to taxes. The investment bank's paying taxes for using that energy within the bonds that they're trading. So you first of all got to identify the bonds, then identify the banks that are trading those bonds, that's the investment banks, and then you've got to identify the taxes that the investment banks are paying for the use of the energy that was transferred from the clearing bank to the bond to the investment bank, because the investment bank's trading the bond. The investment bank is paying taxes to the United States Treasury. You've got to link all that up.
And I think
And
this is
then,
where people are getting it wrong. So I'm glad that you've cleared that up. It's not that you are recouping the money that left your bank account. There is no money. There's no money of substance. There's only what we call money of form. Our energy is what backs everything in the Monopoly board. So when that energy, through those signatures, through tapping your phone, through filling your car up with fuel and tapping your phone at the checkout, whatever it is, throughout your lifetime. So, I mean, even for the average families, when you think about this, an average working family that's worked hard all their life, the amount of signature recoupment that they've left abandoned for all those years that's sitting on the Monopoly board could run into the millions quite easily, couldn't it? That's
for
life
most,
changing for people.
yeah, for most it is millions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So once you know which investment banks are holding on to your energy and they are paying taxes on your energy, historically, because the energy doesn't go away, right? Energy just transfers. Yeah. If you burn a fire, the logs go into ash and the heat dissipates into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
The energy doesn't just disappear, it just moves. So what's happened is your energy has moved from you onto the Monopoly board through a nominee bank who's moved it and moved it and moved it into these bonds. And because the way the Monopoly board works, because the entire Monopoly board is mortgaged and it's bankrupt, the United States Treasury, being the bankruptcy trustee, they have to collect taxes on the use of the energy, which is what they do. And they collect the taxes from the investment banks, which are all operating in the United States system. It's no coincidence that the majority of the world's investment banks are in the United States system in New York. Yeah. There is no coincidence for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever wondered? I mean, I've been there many times. I've been into many of these investment banks in Wall Street. And I did at the time didn't think, well, why are they all here? Why isn't there one in Beijing, or why isn't there one in some other capital city of the world? No, they're all in Wall Street.
Yeah.
Or they're trading somewhere else, but they've got a relationship with a bank in Wall Street.
Yeah.
Because all of those ultimately the taxes that are being paid for the use of the energy the taxes originate from the investment banks in New York, and they pay the United States Treasury, and they pay on different tax modules.
Yeah.
The tax module we're interested in is the 945 tax module.
It is.
And that tax module is directly for the use of the energy. And they don't call it, they don't send their tax return in, the investment banks, to the Treasury and say, this is for the use of human energy. No. They call it all different things, obviously. Yeah. So it's that tax module that we are identifying and then linking it to, if you're doing this or wanting to do this, we link it to from the clearing bank to the bond, from the bond to the investment bank, from the investment bank to the tax module 945, linking all that together so that you're able to access that tax, because you're not recouping the bank payments or the mortgage, you're recouping the taxes that the investment bank has paid for using your energy. And I've used this analogy before, but if you rented somebody your house, and if your house was your energy, you would want them to pay rent for the use of your house. You would want the banks to pay you rent, which is tax, for the use of your energy.
Yeah.
No different.
Yeah.
So you've got step one is find out where your energy went. Which bank did you put it through? Step two is not for you. Step two is for us to figure out the linkages of the clearing bank to the bond to the investment bank to the 945 tax module. All of that is done in the background. You will never know what we're doing because it's all done automatically, right?
So for a member just again, so that members can be clear, or people that are listening to this can be clear, and they're sitting there thinking, I can't remember how much money I spent in, 1982, or, but we're not talking about being exact here, are we?
Doesn't
Just
matter.
just in layman terms, what do we need to be able to track this through the clearing banks, the bonds, the investment banks to the 945? What do we need from the individual? What's the bare minimum that they need to give us for us to be able to facilitate this?
All we need is the name of the banks and the rough amount. That's all we need. We do not need to go into the attic and study and get all their old records out of boxes and add it all up. We don't need that.
Right.
All we need is
they're not got to think about from 1982 to 1986. I used this amount with this bank, and then from 1987 to 1990, I used this bank. It's not necessarily the years. It's who's the bank, roughly how much was it? That's it.
That's it. That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
So, most people I've ever met, and I remember I had thousands of clients, they have a bank that they stay with for a long time.
Yeah, myself included. Yeah.
Some people have more than one bank account. I get it. Some people have business accounts. I get it. But most people have a bank that they open up when they're young, and they stay with that bank for a long time because they get things from the bank and they become a loyal customer. So, if you've got that situation, you just have to estimate how much have you paid out from your bank accounts. Estimate. Nobody's asking for you to go back and get all your bank statements out and add it all up. You don't need to do that. You just need to estimate, this bank, whatever the name of it is, I paid out of my bank accounts, roughly speaking, this much since I was 18. Yeah. And you might be 20% out. Who knows? Your error of tolerance, because nobody can remember. I get it.
Yeah.
But just estimate it. And then I had 3 mortgages. What is the face value of the mortgages? I had 8 credit cards, 2 loans. What was the value of the loans? What was the peak balance on your credit cards? Again, you don't have to be precise. Nobody's asking you to go in a forensic audit or bring in the auditors to go through all your records and figure it all out. You just estimate it. The most important thing is that you need to know the banks that you were working with, that you had the accounts. That's it. You don't need all the, upload of all the bank statements and all of this stuff. It doesn't really matter.
No.
And the reason it doesn't matter is because the investment banks, they buy and sell the bonds, and the bonds themselves, obviously they know what's in the bonds because the managers of those bonds have to know what's in there. But when it gets to the taxes that the investment bank is paying the United States Treasury, they're not saying to the United States Treasury, right, here's $20 for Andy's use of his credit, here's $50 for the use of Ian's credit, here's $35 for the use of Sarah's credit. They're just making a payment.
On all of it.
Although we're tracking it all, and we have to track it all, because we can't put in the electronic reporting officer, that's the tax filing license holder, can't just file in for anything, make it all up. There has to be we have to reconcile it, but the investment banks paying taxes just pay one tax bill. If you think of a business, right? If you're in business, you'll understand what I'm talking about. At the end of the year, if you're paying taxes, you don't send your tax bill to the tax office and break it down by how many customers you had and how much your tax is related to each customer. You just pay the tax bill.
Yeah.
That's the same thing that's going on here.
Yeah.
The investment banks are paying the tax bill. They're not breaking it down into millions or hundreds of millions of little, transactions that went on. They're just paying the tax bill.
Okay. So what's the next step from there?
Well, you've got to have your own nominee, right? So
Okay.
remember, on the Monopoly Board, there are these banks and they're all operating as nominees. If you're going to recoup signature credit, you need your own nominee on the Monopoly Board.
Makes sense.
And that nominee is an international grantor trust. And the birth certificate construct, that's the person, citizen, becomes the grantor of the nominee, which is an international grantor trust.
Okay.
Which is recognized by the United States system with its own tax reference number.
So that's this EIN number that you speak of, yes?
EIN number, yeah.
Okay.
So again, the member doesn't need to do this. We facilitate this part of it. We create the grantor trust. We get a tax reference number. There's an indenture. All of these things are done for the member. The member is the grantor, the creator of the trust.
Okay.
Trust now sits on the Monopoly Board. It's not a piece of paper. It's got a tax reference number. It's a recognized entity. It's actually in the United States system a foreign alien because it is foreign to the United States. It sits internationally on the Monopoly Board, and it will now file through an electronic reporting officer, which is a license holder to file tax returns electronically. It will file 1099 OID against the energy that you've put through the clearing banks into these bonds.
Yeah.
It will identify the banks that have been trading the bonds with the CUSIP numbers, and it will put in 1099 OID, which is going to qualify the nominee, the new nominee, the trust that is sitting on the Monopoly Board as a nominee for you, the creditor, the true creditor, which is the living man, woman, as the beneficiary of the nominee structure, the trust that is now sitting on the new piece on the Monopoly Board, and it's going to file 1099 OID. And then when you go and look on the internet and say, please tell me, or go in your chat GPT and say, please tell me what 1099 OID is, and can I use it for signature credit recoupment? It's going to tell you that if you do that, you're going to end up in jail.
Yeah.
Because,
or the very least with a huge fine.
or very least a huge fine, yeah?
Yeah.
And that is because 1099 OID in the conventional use of the tax filing is for overpayments of tax on investment assets that you've already purchased.
Yeah.
And most people file 1099 OID from the taxpayer itself, which is from the birth certificate construct.
Yes.
The person, citizen. They're not filing 1099 OID from the grantor trust, this new nominee player piece that's been put on the Monopoly Board as a creditor. No. They're filing 1099 OID against investment assets that they bought and sold, and they've got some withheld. They've had taxes withheld by the United States Treasury that belong back to them.
Yeah.
And that is what it's going to tell you on the internet or on your chat GPT or your AI system. It's going to tell you that 1099 OID filings are for the to reclaim withholding taxes on investment assets that you've been buying and selling where you've paid more tax than you should have done.
Yeah. So this is a completely different way of doing it. Completely. The way I understand this is if you are the living man, you are the creditor, and the 98 grantor trust is filing as nominee on your behalf, then essentially you're filing as a creditor. Whereas the other way around that you've spoken about, you're filing as a debtor, surely, if you're the birth certificate construct.
Well, the difference is this, right? The living man, woman is never on the Monopoly Board, right? They're never on the board. So if you file a 1099 OID through the person is the player piece on the Monopoly Board, sends a tax return to the United States Treasury, 1099 OID. That is a debtor entity that is registered to the Monopoly Board, to the Crown, to the cabal that runs the Monopoly Board as their player piece.
Yeah.
That is filing a tax return, wanting to recoup taxes that do not belong to it.
Yeah.
Which is what people have been doing.
Which is why people have been getting into trouble.
You either get a tax bill or you go to jail.
Yeah.
Or you get nothing at all and it all goes silent. So that is the living man woman who is the agent for the birth certificate construct, the person filing 1099 OID. There is nothing about that should ever work. It sometimes does work because the IRS makes a mistake. And people say, oh, I got a check, so it must work. Well, it's not because it was technically sound, it's because the IRS made a mistake.
Yeah.
The way that our system does it, the Clifford Protocol, is you put a new player piece on the Monopoly Board, which is the grantor trust, with its own tax reference number, as an international player piece on the Monopoly Board, as a foreign alien to the United States, that can file tax returns as what's called the holder in due course. Critically important.
Okay.
Not the citizen or the person that's now filing anything. They're not, the citizen person is not even involved in any filing at all. It is the grant trust that is filing a 1099 OID as the holder in due course on behalf of the living man woman who is the beneficiary, who is not on the board. The grantor trust is on the Monopoly Board filing 1099 OID as a nominee for the living man woman who's not on the Monopoly Board. The same living man woman who put the energy through the person onto the board. So you go on the board through the person is the citizen, the birth certificate construct, artificial entity that is a banker under the Bills of Exchange Act. That's how the energy gets on the board. It comes back from the board through the nominee, the new nominee trust that's been put on the Monopoly Board for the benefit of living man woman, the same living man woman who put the energy on the board in the first place. It's like you go in the entrance door and you come out the exit door. You can't go through the entrance and then back through the entrance to the exit. There's two doors. So the grantor trust, which is the artificial construct we've put on the board that is going to file the 1099 OID, the next critical part of this for people to comprehend is that the value of all of the credit that they've put on the Monopoly Board is at zero.
Okay, can you explain that?
Right, human energy goes on the Monopoly Board at the value of zero. It is then traded at a very high value. The future value of the human energy is much higher than zero. So, for example, you put a signature on a mortgage contract.
Yeah.
The banker, that's the citizen, the person, the birth certificate construct, signs a mortgage contract. The mortgage contract says that the bank is going to lend $1 million.
Okay.
So it goes from zero to $1 million in the blink of an eye, yeah, on the signature.
Yeah.
Ex nihilo credit. That $1 million face value mortgage, attaching to it is 25, 30 years of interest.
True. Yeah.
There's another 2 or 3 million at least of commitment, of interest commitment, right?
Yeah.
So that signature that starts off at zero could arguably be worth $4 million on the Monopoly Board.
That makes sense.
Yeah? So when the investment banks get that security that started off its life at zero, where the clearing bank pretended that they'd lent money, which of course they didn't have anything to lend, Then the clearing bank sold that mortgage contract as a security, and they bundled it up with all these other investment securities, mortgage securities, other types of securities. And then the investment bank started buying and selling those securities in the investment markets, hypothecating it, because they can use that 4 million value instrument, they can make that 40 million very easily.
Right.
By hypothecation, because they use it to leverage. They leverage it up so that they can make the face value of that zero. Originally, it was zero, right?
Yeah.
Zero value in the traded markets of the securitization and the investment banks could be easily be 40 million.
Wow.
And then you discount back from the future value, which is that 40 million value. And they're paying taxes on the future value, the use of the future value. Securitization is what is the future value discounted back to today?
Yeah.
That is all securitization is. It's a calculation of what you're using, something which has got a future value, the value of this mortgage, 40 million.
Is that where the term securities and futures comes from, by any chance?
Exactly. All futures contracts.
Yeah.
It's what it is. You know, when you watch Trading Places, here's a movie from a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Winstrop and all those guys, and the guys trading in the Chicago exchanges, trading futures contracts on I think it was on hogs and on wheat and on grain and all that kind of stuff and all that stuff. That's futures contracts. Mm. It's very similar. They're all like interconnected, these things, right? They're trading something with a value in the future. That's why it's called a futures.
Yeah. I mentioned that, Ian, because I mean, I knew that anyway, but I mentioned that for the audience perspective, because I want people to understand that we're not just making this shit up. You know, this is real. This is real terminology. This is real structure. This is real financial manipulation that is being used every single day of the week. It's not just some airy-fairy idea. This is how the system is built. And we're just using the system and playing the game of Monopoly at a pro level. Like I said at the beginning, that's all we're doing here, guys. We're not making this up. This is real, and this is the way the world works.
I can unpack every single component of the process and justify it to be 100% real. There's nothing invented here. No. This is a complex machine that I've taken apart and put all the components of the machine on my desk, and I could look at all of them and I could test each one of them, and it's real, and it has a job to do in the engine. That's all it is, just like an engine. It's just filled up of component parts, like most things are. I've often been asked, Andy, in my career, when I've built something from a whole bunch of components, and I always get asked the same question. Yeah, it looks really good, but does it work? And it's like, well, all the component parts work, and I've put them together, so the overall plan or program or protocol should work, shouldn't it? Because if all the parts work, why wouldn't the whole work?
Yeah.
And that's something I've struggled with in my career, because that's all I do, is I put pieces together that individually work. I put them together to make up a protocol or a program or a plan. That's all it is here. So if you want to know how something works, as I mentioned earlier, you've got to take it apart. I took it apart from A through Z to make sure it all made sense, and it all makes absolute perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
So once you've got your you filed the 1099 OID, but I say you're not doing anything if you're watching this. The electronic reporting officer that's got a license from the IRS and software with the IRS straight into their system is going to file 1099 OID against the payer of the tax. The payer of the tax is the investment bank that is linked to your clearing banks
Yep.
through all those bonds with all those reference numbers. So the 1099 OID is going to be fired into the IRS electronically with a license holder filing the 1099 OID on an electronic platform,
Yep.
an automated platform, and it is either going to be accepted or rejected there and then.
That is instantaneous, isn't it? When that filing goes through, it's either accepted or rejected immediately. We're not sitting around waiting for an approval.
You're not sending in a bit of paper and hoping for the best. Are they going to do anything with it? How do we know if they have done anything with it? No, it's filed electronically, and the system either accepts it or rejects it there and then.
Yeah.
Right at the point of pushing the button to send it in.
Yeah.
That then goes into the IRS's system, and they have their own algorithm, which is going to now investigate it.
Yeah.
So they might reject it because it makes no sense whatsoever up front. So if it's not rejected, now it's into their algorithm, and their algorithm is going to check it out. And what the algorithm is going to look at is who is filing for this 1099 OID. What entity is filing? And that, in this case, is the 98 series grantor trust. So the algorithm can go, tick that box. That is potentially the holder in due course filing a tax return.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the next thing it's going to look at is who is the recipient of the taxes and who is the payer. Well, the recipient is the grantor trust. The 98 series grantor trust. Remember, we put that new player piece on the board as the nominee for the true creditor, the living man woman. So that new player piece, the IRS is going to look at it. Does it have the standing to file a 1099 OID? Looks like it does. It could well be the holder in due course of the credit.
Yeah.
It's then going to look at the payer and the recipient. The payer is the investment bank.
Yeah.
That's the payer of the tax. And the recipient of the tax is the 98 series grantor trust, the nominee, that now is the holder in due course. Meaning, it's the rightful recipient of the energy, the taxes on the energy. That's what holder in due course means.
Yeah.
It's you've got to unpack the words, right? It's the holder of the credit in due course. In due course means it's waiting to get back what it's rightfully owed. And because it's filed, and for anyone who's got a mortgage, this is critically important, because the grantor trust, as this new nominee that's on the Monopoly board, has filed 1099 OID as the holder in due course of the credit that the banks have been using, now the creditor position of the banks that have been pretending and presuming that they are the creditors to a mortgage are no longer the creditors. Because the grantor trust that is sitting on the Monopoly board as the nominee for the true creditor, the living man woman, that grantor trust is now become the holder in due course of the credit energy. The banks can have no further claim on that credit energy. They can't use it anymore in their hypothecation game.
No.
And that extinguishes the mortgage, which I'm going to be explaining about on this weekend's webinar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not me saying this. It's the IRS that says it. The IRS under publication 1212. And you know something really uncanny, Andy? I've got my mobile phone in front of me, right? And the screen is black. And I was creating a report earlier, and I was just putting in the 1212 section in the report that talks about IRS 1212, and my phone flashed up, and on my phone it's got a big clock at 12:12.
Let me guess, 12 minutes past 12. Yeah.
At 12:12, and it happened on a webinar not long ago. I just started talking about IRS 1212 at 12:12, the time 12:12.
Yeah.
And it happened again on my phone. It's unbelievable, man.
Yeah. And for you guys out there, in case you didn't know already, where do you think the tax identification number for your 98 grantor trust even comes from? That EIN number is issued by the IRS. So this is a legitimate, lawful structure that we are creating here. This is the doorway onto the monopoly board. You can't step on it as a living person. You can't. But with a nominee structure, the 98 foreign grantor trust structure, with its own EIN, its own tax identification number issued by the IRS, it's a very powerful structure to have, isn't it, Ian?
Somebody said to me when I wrote a paper recently that this should win the Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
Because the Nobel Prize was handed out, and it's, as far as I know, it still is handed out, for processes or inventions that could change the world for the better.
Yeah.
Well, why couldn't this, this, I think this qualifies, doesn't it?
Yeah. Certainly going to change a lot of people's lives. It really is.
So once the 1099 OID is filed by the grantor trust, that is the holder in due course, now that the taxes which the investment bank has paid now belong to the holder in due course, which is the grantor trust that is the nominee for the living man woman. The living man woman, remember, is not on the board, not on the monopoly board. Their new player piece is on the board, and there's no registration of that player piece. This is critically important, right?
No.
The grantor trust is being put on the monopoly board free and clear of any liens or encumbrances from those that run the board. So they haven't got any claim over it.
No.
Whereas they have got a claim over the person. The birth certificate construct, they've got 100% ownership of that player piece because it's theirs. They created it for their own purposes on the monopoly board, which is why people get massive tax bills when they file from the citizen position or the person, the birth certificate construct. This is entirely different. Yep. This is how to play them at their own game, right? So think of it this way. They devised this game of Monopoly. When I say they, that those that run the Monopoly board, and the only way that Monopoly board can work is through banks, through clearing banks, or through central banks, or through the Bank for International Settlements. Yeah, so that all of these banks are all nominees for the people. So if you're going to play the game, you've already got a bank, but that is the person, the birth certificate construct.
Yeah. But
you don't control it because it's registered to them. It's registered to the cabal. So by putting a grantor trust on the monopoly board that is now operating exclusively for the beneficiary, which is the living man woman, you've now put your own bank on the board.
Yeah.
That can receive the taxes that ordinarily were going to the United States Treasury, which they don't need, by the way, because they create the. Has anybody wondered how the Federal Reserve finances itself?
I wonder.
Do you think they use taxes to go and buy their lunch? No, they just create credit ex nihilo all the time.
Yeah.
So you put a new piece on the board. We facilitated it. We've done all the heavy lifting of figuring out where all the references are, linked to everything together, then employed a licensed tax preparer with the right software to fire in the 1099 OID into the United States Treasury, where their algorithm can now start looking into, is this a legitimate redirection of taxes or is it bogus? So their algorithm is now going to look into it. The IRS algorithm 810 is going to have a look. What is the structure that's filed the 1099 OID? Is the investment bank as the payer, have they paid enough taxes to meet the claim against them? Because the 1099 OID is laying up a claim of redirection of taxes. It's also changing the creditor position. So the bank can no longer claim that the mortgage that was in that investment bundle, that investment bond, they can no longer claim that they are the owner of it or the creditor to it, because they're not.
Okay.
Because the record's been corrected. This is a game changer for mortgages, right? Now the IRS system is going to look at all the other claims that have been made against that taxpayer. That's the investment bank 945 tax module. How many other claims have come in against that tax module? So if there's $1 billion worth of taxes paid by the investment bank on their 945 module for a tax year, but there's 3 billion of 1099 OID tax redirection claims, the Treasury can't fund them all.
No,
because it hasn't got enough.
So what happens in that scenario if the taxes paid isn't enough to cover the redirection from the 1099s?
Well, that's where this, you see, and if I was ever going to debate somebody who was trying to prove that what I've been explaining doesn't work technically, I would get them straight into Rev Proc 2002-2026, right? And that says it's code in the Uniform Commercial Code that says that the 945 tax module, the taxes being paid on that module are priority taxes, and enabling the holder in due course, which is the grantor trust, has a priority to move taxes from the investment bank's tax returns, their other tax modules, onto the 945 tax module as a priority, as the priority over all other tax modules that the investment bank's paying against.
Wow. Okay.
So that to me, if I was arguing in a courtroom, right, that is your slam dunk, close your book, you've won the case. Why would the IRS publish tax code that says that you can command the United States Treasury to move taxes from another tax module onto the 945 tax module to finance the redirection of the recoupment to the grantor trust?
Okay.
If the 945 tax module didn't have a priority, why would they write code in the Uniform Commercial Code that you can command them to invoke to move taxes onto the 945 tax module if it wasn't the priority tax module?
Right. So even if the investment banks hadn't paid enough tax during the course of that year to allow for that, you can simply, you're not putting a request in, by the sounds of things, you can command them to move from another module to the 945 module to make up the difference, yeah?
Capped out the amount that the investment bank is paid overall in taxes. So easy numbers, investment bank pays 100 billion in taxes in a year. They pay 10 billion on the 945 tax module and 90 billion on other tax modules.
Yep.
If we had a claim for 100 billion through all of the grantor trusts, we would be able to command the IRS to move the 90 billion from the other tax modules onto the 945 tax module to redirect the taxes to the grantor trusts that add up to 100 billion in 1099 OID recoupment claims.
Wow.
through
That's
Rev Prop 2002 20026. Look it up.
Yeah.
If you don't believe it.
So once that's been done, once the 945 has been reconciled against the 1099, what are the final stages of this then?
Well, now you've got some other pieces that you've got to put in place, right? So it's all very well creating a grantor trust, getting a licensed tax preparer to fire in the 1099 I do, figure out all of the linkages, CUSIP numbers, figure out whether there's enough taxes on the 945 tax module. That's, you've got to do all that, but that's not enough. Now what you've got to do is you've got to have a recipient bank that is going to receive the redirected taxes into a bank account for the grantor trust. Now you can imagine, right? If you were to call up your bank and say, I'm expecting $3 million in a tax recoupment from the IRS into this grantor trust that I've set up, that is, by the way, it's a foreign alien grantor trust. Would you be happy to open me a bank account for that? I think you're going to have people on the other end of the line going silent because they wouldn't even know what you were talking about.
They wouldn't have a clue, would they? I can help you with your stolen or your lost debit card, or I can change your address for you. But yeah,
I can help you to open an account if you're going to use it for your business or for your savings. But what are you talking about? You've got a $3 million tax recoupment that you want me to open an account for a grantor trust. Where is that grantor trust, by the way? Oh, it's not in our country, no. It's an international. Oh, you can speak to our international division, and they might be able to open an account for that, which they probably won't be able to, because they don't know what it is.
No.
And then you've got well, it sounds a bit suspicious. Is it money laundering?
Yeah,
this is what the bank.
Next thing.
Is it money laundering? Is it redirected, proceeds of crime? What is it? We better not go anywhere near that, because that sounds a bit dodgy to us. If you were the bank, if you were the bank's compliance department, right? They won't understand it, and I guarantee they won't understand it, because we've talked to banks about it, and nobody understands it. Because even the people in the banks, who you would expect would know what I've just been explaining, have no idea whatsoever.
No.
Nothing. Zero. No idea. You can work in an investment bank or a clearing bank and have absolutely no idea what the bank really does. In fact, most people do that work in the banks. They have no clue whatsoever about how the bank actually operates. Nothing. And they go to work every day, and they might retire after 40 years of working in the banks, and they still don't know how it works. It's extraordinary.
So this asset fortress that you mention in your document as well, let's talk a little bit about that then, because it's one thing going through this 5-step scientific process of recouping the taxes paid, but if you can't realize those funds, that's not much use to anybody, is it? So you spoke about the asset fortress and this infinity loop as well, where you've got this long-term wealth management spend and recoup cycle. So I want people to understand what you mean by that. So why, if someone's either an existing member or somebody new to watching this, why should somebody have this particular construct set up? Once the credit's reclaimed, why is it essential to hold it in this asset fortress protocol that you talk about?
So you've got a grantor trust that's sitting on the monopoly board as the nominee. It's now got the standing as the holder in due course. It's the rightful owner of the taxes that have been redirected to it. So the next thing you need to do is you need to get a bank account for that trust.
Okay.
To receive the recoupment of the taxes from the United States Treasury. And they call that IRS TREAS, TREAS 310.
Yep.
So they actually have a name for it. So again, if I was debating this or in a courtroom, I would be bringing out all of these references saying, well, if it's not real, how come they've got a reference for this? How come they've got a reference for that? Yeah. So the IRS TREAS 310 encompasses ACH and Fedwire. These are two different electronic banking transfer methods.
Yeah.
Over $1 million, it's Fedwire, and under $1 million is ACH. Yeah. So the grantor trust that is now going to receive these taxes, the recoupment of the taxes, the redirection of the taxes from the United States Treasury under the 945 tax module, is now going to file, the grantor trust is going to file a tax return. It's an interesting description, right?
It is, isn't it? When you break it, when you stop and think about what you've just said.
A tax return. Well, what does that mean? It means they're going to return the tax to you, if you actually know what it means. So the grantor
people would think that means, and they'd think the opposite.
They would think that they're actually returning the tax to the tax department, but it doesn't mean that at all. It's actually the other way around. So in this context, the 1041 is filed by the electronic reporting officer who's licensed to file it, having received the wages and tax transcript. You've got a wages and tax transcript that has come in that confirms that the IRS is comfortable to release and redirect the taxes to the grantor trust.
Yep.
If you don't have a wages and tax transcript, there's no point filing a 1041, which is the tax return.
And for anybody new watching this, that's what one looks like. That is a wage. Well, there's two there. There's one for me. There's one for my wife. These have come directly from the IRS. I know these are redacted, but there are the tax withheld, federal tax withheld amounts written on there. I'm actually going to be doing another interview, Ian, with another member of our team here who has, has had a lot of experience with the ERO system and the filing of the 1099s, the 1041s, and just understanding this process that you're talking about. And we're actually going to be giving you guys, not just a couple of pieces of paper that I've got here, these are mine and my wife's, but we're going to be giving you some hard evidence of the type of recoupments that the IRS have verified, have put on the 945 and corroborated those numbers, and have then transferred that to the wages and tax transcript itself. I've got a whole wodge of examples that we're going to share with you on screen so you can see. And we're not talking a few pounds and shillings here. We're talking millions and millions of dollars, just so people watching this understand that these components that you've put together do work, Ian. I mean, how much have we actually had confirmations back for, roughly speaking, so far?
Well, I think round numbers was $600 million. I think it may have been, it would have been a lot more than that if the saboteurs hadn't have scuppered it in September of 2025. I think it was over $2 billion, in fact. So
yeah, just let that soak in, guys. $2 billion worth of recoupment. So this works not on just the isolated case here and there. This works at scale. It works in volume. And this has all been verified, ratified by the IRS, by their 810 algorithm, all been done lawfully through an ERO, electronically. This is very, very real, guys. So I just want that to sink in for a minute. Okay. So comes back on the tax transcript. We've got that side of things there.
So the grantor trust it's now ready to file 1041, which is the tax return, through the electronic reporting officer. Got the license, it's still got the software. There's an account for that grantor trust on the software. They put in all the references, they put in the wages and tax transcript references, everything is referenced up. And then there's an electronic filing that's sent into the United States Treasury, basically to pull down whatever it says on the wages and tax transcript and send it under the IRS TREAS, TREAS 310. Go and look it up if you want to know what it is, through either ACH if it's under $1 million or Fedwire over $1 million, to a bank that is already pre-agreed to receive it.
Yeah.
And we have got a bank, one of the biggest banks in America, that has agreed to receive the these tax recoupments. Now, I'm going to ask a question to everybody watching this. Do you think that we would be able to go to one of the biggest banks in the United States and explain to them what we're doing with absolute, with nothing hidden, complete transparency on what we're doing, and for them to review it as they have done, for them to come back and say, we're happy to proceed with this, when they know that there could be billions of dollars flowing through this system every year, and they are one of the biggest banks in the United States, that if there was something quirky about it or something which was untoward about it, they would be fined for taking part in this on this program.
Yeah.
You think that any bank in its right mind, with full disclosure, would agree to that?
No, I don't, because banks are all about risk and all about compliance, aren't they? That's their top priority. What's the risk, and is it compliant for us to even get involved with this?
One of the investment banking programs I built many years ago, it took me 2 years to get a bank, one of the biggest custodian banks in the world, a bank called SEI, to actually agree to a particular type of transaction that I was and a fund that I was launching. 2 years of due diligence, 2 years before they said yes. Banks don't say yes. They don't need to say yes to everybody who knocks their door. They pick and choose what they want to be involved in. They don't need the money, do they? Because they can create it out of thin air. So they only get involved in things that kind of fit their model. So that is very, very significant. Again, if I was in a courtroom trying to defend whether this works or not, I would then pull that out of my bag and say, well, how is it this particular bank has agreed to receive all of these recoupments then, and they've done due diligence on the whole thing, A through Z? How is it that the electronic reporting officer, who's agreed to be have his name put on to all of the tax filings and operate as part of the trustee group, how is it that that guy, who's risking his whole career, would agree to do this if it wasn't real and bona fide?
So explain to me now, once the money's come through to these agreed bank accounts, or this agreed bank account, what happens at that point? How does it then become usable for the member? Right.
So the grantor trust that is filed the 1099 OID, filed the 1041, had the wages and tax transcript proof. It's got all of that. It's now holding on to the funds. So $1 million has now arrived in that bank account that is the bank account for that grantor trust. The member is going to say, that's amazing, fantastic, but how do I get my hands on that million? That's where the Asset Fortress comes in. So the Asset Fortress protocol is a second grantor trust that sits on the monopoly board where the as a nominee,
Okay.
for the credits, for the true creditor, beneficiary, living man, woman.
Yeah.
This time, the Asset Fortress Protocol is going to have the grantor that creates it is the birth certificate construct, and the trustee of the grantor trust is the birth certificate construct. So the person, the citizen, the birth certificate construct, the artificial player piece that everyone's using all the time on the Monopoly board is now become the grantor and the trustee of the Asset Fortress Protocol, meaning that the living man, woman, who is the agent for the birth certificate construct, the citizen, the person, has got 100% control over the Asset Fortress Protocol.
Yeah.
And the first grantor trust that's sitting there with $1 million in this example is going to send that million to the Asset Fortress Protocol. And the Asset Fortress Protocol is going to receive that $1 million. And now a donation is going to be made to the Old Souls Nation. That's the Freedom Plan. And that donation is signature credit creation.
Yeah.
And the remaining amount, whatever the amount is, because there's different deals for different people, right? Whatever the remaining amount is, the member can spend signature credit signature credit again, issuing out transactions from the Asset Fortress Protocol that qualifies to be recouped as signature credit recoupment.
So this Asset Fortress that you're talking about, this other 98 grantor trust, you've got one for filing, you've got another one that essentially is acting as your trust for your assets, but also will have I'm assuming a bank account attached to that for the money to be sent to. Does that bank account, is that just like any other bank account? As in, I've got a bank card, I can use that for my transactions, or how does that work?
It'll be a specialist account that has a bank card, and you can do everything with it that you can do with your current bank account. But it won't be, it won't be down the high street, the bank down the high street that provides it. It'll be a specialist banking facility. We offer the members a choice as to who they want for their Asset Fortress. There will be a range of options for those members who want to choose from the options. Of course, everybody will, of course. And now you've got the private treasury. That's what this Asset Fortress really is. It is a treasury. Every king and queen who's ever been in the world has had a treasury, right?
Yeah.
That's what you have. If you're very, very wealthy and you have a family office that is looking after your wealth, you have a treasury. That's what the Asset Fortress is. It's a treasury. It's going to manage the spending of the living man, woman, not the player piece, the person, the citizen. That you don't need those bank accounts for this. They don't feature. You can still keep them, but they don't feature in this design. You have the Asset Fortress, which is the private treasury that is going to send out new credit, spend. And then that is signature credit. Why? Because the grantor and the trustee are bankers. Because the grantor and the trustee is the person, is the citizen, which is the banker.
Yeah.
And then the donation that was made to the Old Souls Nation for the Freedom Plan, that is signature credit.
That you've also created.
In the next cycle.
That can be recouped as well.
So you have $1 million. It came into the Asset Fortress Protocol. X percentage of that went out as a donation to the Old Souls Nation as signature credit. The remainder was spent on whatever that the member wants to spend it on. The next tax filing cycle is going to recoup the donation and recoup all the spending, so that $1 million comes back.
Comes back again. So that's
It
this
goes
infinity loop that you talk about, yeah?
the infinity loop. Yeah. I don't
Wow.
think it gets any better than that, guys. Quite
No,
frankly.
if you're hearing this for the first time, then and your mind's getting a little bit blown with all of this, that's exactly where I was when I first started hearing about this. I got a little bit angry, if I was honest, to begin with, when I realized what was going on and how long it had been going on for. Like you said, Ian, if we'd have known this 20, 30 years ago, how different things would have been. But the fact that we do know it now, I take that as a blessing and I take that as a privilege. You know, the knowledge that you've put together here is going to be life changing for my family, for so many other people as well. And the fact that you can recycle this as well, this infinity loop, this isn't a one hit wonder, is it? This is something that people can do year in, year out. But here's the catch. I don't think that we're going to be able to do this indefinitely. I don't think, based on the way the world's going and the global agenda that is creeping in, that people are going to be able to continue to spend and recoup, spend and recoup, spend and recoup just frivolously every year, relying on this cycle. However robust it is right now, there's going to come a time, isn't there, where the agenda does start to creep in and people are going to start to, there's going to be a window that's going to close. I mean, when you talk about this asset fortress protocol being a banker, being this nominee where you can spend and receive the infinity loop of abandoned credit, I get that, but bearing in mind the bigger picture, what would you be advising people to do, and how would you be advising them to leverage that asset fortress to future proof themselves and their families while they can do this at the moment?
Well, the asset fortress is a private treasury to hold assets as well as a mechanism to spend and recoup. It is dual purpose. You hold assets that have real tangible value. And if you can get legal title to them, so physical gold, physical silver, is you can get the legal title to that. You can get the legal title to many assets. It might be difficult with property because you sometimes can't get the legal title. But if you can, then you can include property in there. And now you've got a treasury, which not only is a spend and recoupment treasury, it is a treasury to hold assets, which, by the way, is exactly what the royal families do. They have a treasury to hold the assets.
Yeah,
it's no different, right? And they, by the way, they use trusts. It's the same thing. So the asset fortress protocol becomes your wealth fortress. It is the fortress that holds your wealth away from the creditors, away from anybody who's trying to destroy your opportunities and your wealth. It is separate from that. And it doesn't have to report ID. There's no ID going on here. There's no track and trace ID going on here, because it's not the spending process. There is no digital ID linkage back to the person, because it is the trust that is spending. It is not the person; it's the trust itself. The asset fortress protocol that is spending. So it solves the digital ID track and trace problem, and it solves the you'll own nothing and be happy problem. The UN Agenda 2030 problem, because you can move tangible assets into it that nobody can touch. And what you can do is, if you buy real assets, what I mean by real assets that have substance, that you can, the trust can actually own, not equitable title like your car or your house or your business, because nobody who thinks that they own those actually does. People say, oh, I've got a really successful business, and my question to them would be, are you the shareholder? Oh yeah, I'm the shareholder. I said, well, is the business registered somewhere? Yeah, it's registered. I said, where is it registered? Oh, it's registered at Companies House. Oh, really? Right. So that means the government owns it, does it? And they won't realise that that company is now owned by the government. Registered at Companies House. Registered. That's what regist means, right? So in the Asset Fortress Protocol, you're not registering the assets that are being held with the government.
No.
You're recording them under your trust indenture for the benefit of the beneficiaries, which could be your children, your friends, whoever you want to put in there.
So if somebody had a house, I get it with the gold and the silver, for example, that you can get legal title for gold and silver. I know we've spoken a little bit about allodial title or fee simple title before when it comes to land and property, and how difficult that is to achieve. But would it still be worth somebody, if they had a property, to put the property into their asset fortress? And if it was worth doing, how would that actually sit in there? What title would somebody, or would the trust have over that asset?
Well, they can definitely put the equitable title in, which is it's just the same title they've already got, right? They've got equitable title. They can use that property. They can transfer the equitable title to the asset fortress, and they can still use the property because they're the beneficiary of the trust, right? They don't have to pay rent or anything crazy like this. But the actual legal title is probably still owned by the government.
Okay.
Which is why they can seize it, by the way. I was having a chat with somebody yesterday who said, oh yeah, there's some of the governments around the world are corrupt. They come and take your property away if you don't pay taxes, or they just come and take the property away for any reason that they feel is appropriate. And they're pirates and criminals. And I said, well, actually they're not, because they already own the property. They've got the legal title.
What's theirs.
They've just taken back what's already theirs. Whoever it was that was using it is using it on a rental agreement, which is equitable title. And if you don't play the game as the renter in the way that they want you to, they come and take the asset because it's already theirs. And this is what a lot of people aren't getting. You know, if the tow truck comes and takes your car away because you didn't pay the road tax, you know, you can't really go down to the police and say that the government's stolen my car, because it's already theirs.
Yeah. So when it comes to implementation of this, I mean, I totally get it. You know, I think it's genius that you can use the recoupment side of things, which we know has no value to it anyway. It's just ledgers in and out, as we've said. So money has no value to it. But you can actually use something that has no value to buy things that have real value and put them into your asset fortress as well. So why would you not want to do that?
Well, that's the smartest thing you could ever do, right? Is to take money of no substance. Literally, it's fairy dust.
Yeah.
It is just numbers on screens, and then go and use that to purchase real assets like gold, silver, like maybe art, maybe something which you can get the legal title for, something physical that you could buy. Maybe you can get legal title to some land. Maybe you can get it to the house that you're in. Maybe it all depends on the circumstances. Now you've got real value in your private treasury's got substance value. It's not just got the right to use the stuff. You actually own it outright.
Yeah,
in the trust. And of course, then you've got to remember that the smartest people on the planet own nothing, but control everything.
Yeah.
So the living man, woman is not the trustee, is not the grantor, is the beneficiary. So they get to use it, but they don't own it. The trust owns it. And if there's ever any problem, it is the trust that has to deal with the problem, not the living man, woman.
Yeah.
Own nothing and control everything. That's what the smartest people on the planet do. And that's what you're able to do with the Asset Fortress protocol.
Well, Ian, I think this is genius. I think it's life-changing in terms of, call to action and next steps for anybody watching this. I hope that you can see to some extent from what we've been through here that there is a definite transition from being a subject to an administrator with all of this. It's the single most important move you can make on this monopoly board. If you're in a position where you're ready to recoup your historical credit energy and move into that state of stewardship and taking ownership and taking responsibility for what's yours, we've got a team of consultants here that can help you. All you've got to do is go to your members area here at the Republic of Old Souls. We have a private members association. If you haven't joined, we encourage you to join. And in that private members association, you can book a call with a consultant and they can break everything down for you in detail and get you started on your personal journey. Don't leave your abandoned energy sitting there on the monopoly board. Claim it. That is exactly what my wife and I are doing. It's what Ian is doing. And I cannot wait to see that come to fruition very shortly. So that's all I've got to say, Ian, on the subject matter. Any final thoughts from yourself before we wrap this up?
Yeah, my final thoughts are that many people have said to me over the years, could you spend some time with me? Could you come and have a chat with me? Can you come round, or we'll meet up somewhere and we'll have a chat together about what they want to do, right? Because I've had that all my life, right? All my professional career, people are saying, I'd like to get an hour with you, Ian. I'd like to have some time with you so we can go through, you could share with me what you know about how I could solve this or whatever. It's happened to me all the way through my life, not less so in recent years because of the propaganda. But in the early years, that's all I ever experienced. Well, you will be able to do that very, very soon with the Ian Clifford avatar. So we are currently working on an avatar that will be rolled out as quickly as it can be rolled out, that's got my knowledge in its memory. And you'll be able to talk to it about whatever questions you've got, you'll be able to talk to it, and it should be giving you the same answer that I would be giving you.
Amazing. Amazing. So guys, if you are interested in moving forwards, if you're on the fence, then my encouragement would be get into the private members association. Once we have the avatar rolled out, you literally be able to sit across the table from a virtual version of Ian with all the knowledge, all the data sets, all the information. Every technical report that Ian's ever written will be in the brain of that avatar, will be in its knowledge base. There won't be a question that you ask about the protocols that it won't be able to answer for you, and hopefully be able to tailor the answer potentially to your personal situation as well. But certainly from a technical perspective, it'll be able to give you absolute on-point accurate answers. So super excited about that. I hope, guys, that you found the interview today regarding currency creation beneficial. I know that there's been a lot of interest in currency creation. There's also been a lot of confusion as to what it actually is. So I hope now you understand that in more detail. You've got the ability to go back to the age of majority, 18, 21, whatever the country is that you're from. But you consider that if you're in your mid-30s to mid-50s, think about all the credit that you've put out on the monopoly board and you've never, ever reclaimed that back. Even if you're just an average, hardworking family that's struggling to get by, and there's plenty of those right now, the amount that you've left on that monopoly board over the last 20, 30 odd years is a life-changing amount for you and your family. Reclaim it, secure it, put it in your Asset Fortress protocol, buy things of real substance and value to them, like gold and silver and art and all these things that Ian's been talking about. Leverage that infinity loot to be able to continue to do that and secure your family's future. I can't think why anybody wouldn't want to do that, Ian, but I know that this is something that a lot of people will ignore. I hope for those of you who are savvy enough to see the substance and the benefit of this, that you'll take action. And we're here to help you if you do. So thank you for watching us. We'll see you on the next episode. Look out for my next interview, which is going to be some hard, cold evidence of transcripts, multi-million-dollar transcripts. I'm going to be reading those off for you, sharing my screen, and myself and a colleague of mine is going to be going through a little bit more detail about what we've seen behind the scenes in terms of the filing process and how that's been working, so that it will only just reinforce what we've done on our interview today with Ian. So for now, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now, guys.
Bye for now.